My childhood was messed up. Now I know a lot of people say that and everyone's in therapy for something, but mine really was, y'all. I was born to a single mother who was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And she tried her best, she did, but it was pretty chaotic. She would think that the Nazis were poisoning the food supply. She thought the government was spying on us, which I don't even think counts as a paranoid delusion anymore. But anyway, it was a bad situation, and soon enough, the courts got involved, and at the age of 5, I was removed from her care and went to live with my maternal grandmother, my Jewish bubby, Sylvia. So I was like, oh, great, I'm going to grandma's. And so I get there, and I soon learned that the way she communicated was through screaming. So growing up, I heard a lot of this. Leah! Leah! There's a fork in the sink. Put it in the dishwasher. Leah! The bedspread, it's crooked. Come over here and fix that up. Or, Leah! There's a crumb on the countertop that you missed. And she would take one of her long magenta fingernails and point to this like infinitesimally small crumb. So that's the household I grew up in. She was a complete dictator, and it was all about cleanliness. That was the #1 priority. And even though there was all this mess going on in our lives, and there was like the chaos with the mental illness and all that, if everything was spotless, then it was somehow okay. So when you grow up in a kind of environment like that, there's pretty much one of two things that you can do. You can submit, or you can rebel. And I actually chose rebellion. So I would start to take pleasure in like intentionally leaving things out, just to like piss her off and like mess with her sense of order. So I would like leave a book out, and she'd be like, Leah, get over here and put that book away. And I was an adolescent at this point. I'd be like, who the fuck cares, Grandma? And she'd be like, I care. And then she'd take the magenta fingernail and she'd point at me, and she'd be like, I can't wait to see what your house is gonna look like one day. So as I got older, my habits got worse and worse, and I didn't like it. I didn't like not being able to find things. I didn't like not being able to invite people over because the place was so disgusting. But it was like in this one area of my life, I just could not get it together. Now, they say that you end up marrying somebody who kind of like reminds you of your family, maybe, possibly. And I end up marrying this man who, of course, really values cleanliness and order. And it's set up kind of like the same power dynamic, but instead of screaming, he would beg. He'd be like, Leah, please go through the 7-foot-high, stack of papers in the office. Or Leah, please, today's the day. Come on, we're gonna clean up. We're gonna do it together. Come on. And I'd run out the door. And he'd go on a binge clean while I was gone and come back. The place would be spotless. And it would stay like that for half a day, and I would start to spread all my shit all over the place. Well, not literally, but all my crap and my stuff. And so, yeah, it went on and on like that, and it was really tense, and then we went on to have a baby. And so you can imagine now, not only is, my mess everywhere, and now we brought a baby into the mix, so there's the baby's mess, and it was so bad, literally, I needed 3 weeks notice to have guests over. It was that bad. And one time, this poor man, I don't know what he was thinking, decided to invite a neighbor over for an impromptu drink after work. And the place was so bad, literally, you could not walk, without stepping on things. And my son had been eating Cheerios, and the bag of Cheerios exploded, and there were Cheerios everywhere. And so he and the neighbor are kicking through this and crunching on the fucking Cheerios, and the neighbor just downs his beer and runs away in horror. And my husband comes up to me and he's like, I've never been so embarrassed in my life. And it wasn't long after that we got into couples counseling. And he did announce that he was leaving for many reasons, but the messy thing was definitely up near the top of the list. So I end up, becoming a single mom. I'm broke. I'm unemployed. It's bad. It's really bad. And, I can barely make the mortgage. I'm like in danger of losing the house. But I decided to hire these wonderful women to come clean, and so that made it just like a little bit safe, So it was like they still couldn't quite tackle the mess, but it helped a little bit. So remember my bubby Sylvia that I talked about in the beginning? She, about 3 years ago, started to become very ill. And at a certain point, it was clear that she was going to die. And I flew out to California to be with her. And she had been unconscious for some time at that point, and all the family gathered, and everyone kind of showed their, gave their final goodbyes. And one by one, they all start leaving. And I decide I'm going to stay by her side, even though she tortured me for my whole life. I was going to be there for her. And I've never been very religious, but I looked up. I started going on my phone, and I looked up the sort of Jewish rituals before death. And one of them is for the person to say this prayer called the Vidui, which is kind of like a final atonement, like a metaphorical cleaning house before you go to meet your maker. So I say this prayer, and it's like the person who's dying is supposed to recite it, but she was unconscious, so I recited it for her. And even though, I wasn't dying, I felt like I was asking for forgiveness, or I was kind of atoning for the ways in which I'd hurt other people in my life. And it was this really, really powerful moment. And soon after that, it was really, really late at night. I got pretty tired and kind of fell asleep on her, on her bed, kind of hunching over the bed. And I kid you not, this huge, huge thunderclap hits. And I wake up and I look up and I see this woman take her last breath. This woman who had loved and tortured me for my entire life. And so at that point, I went home, and I went back to her house and took a long rest. And then I woke up, and what did I do? I started cleaning. See, she had been chair bound toward the end of her life, and the place was just, not up to her standards. So I started mopping and scrubbing and cleaning, and by the time I was done, it was as spotless as my childhood home had been growing up. And today, I found a balance between chaos and perfect order. So while my house that I live in now might not be up to Bubby Sylvia's perfectly exacting standards, it's a nice, clean, safe environment. When things get messy, I clean them up. And, while it wasn't up to her standards, I think she would have been proud. Thank you.